There's a conversation happening behind closed doors across the WNBA that no one in an official capacity wants to have on camera. It is a conversation about power, about who truly drives franchise decisions, and about what happens when the most talented player on a roster stops waiting for permission and starts building the team herself. For the better part of 2 full seasons, Caitlyn Clark absorbed punishment. She endured hard fouls that crossed the line from competitive to personal. She navigated a league where physicality was deployed not as strategy, but as statement, where veteran players treated her arrival not as evolution, but as invasion, and where the establishment seemed perfectly comfortable watching one of the most electrifying offensive talents in basketball history get hammered possession after possession without meaningful consequence. And through all of it, the Indiana Fever front office stood largely silent. They watched, they evaluated, they processed. They held meetings and reviewed film and discussed long-term strategy while their franchise centerpiece was getting clotheslined on national television. But something has fundamentally shifted in Indianapolis. Something seismic. Something that the rest of the league has...
Winning. Being able to play with Caitlyn Clark, I think that was a huge eye-opening. Like, I have the opportunity to play with one of the greatest players that's ever going to play the game of basketball. So for me, once I also heard that, like, oh, she really wants me here too, I was like, oh, well, let's get it done then. There's no questions about it.
Only just begun to understand. Caitlyn Clark is no longer simply playing basketball for the Indiana Fever. She is shaping the roster. She is influencing personnel decisions. She is operating with the strategic vision of a general manager while simultaneously performing at an MVP level on the court. And the move she just orchestrated, the signing of Myisha Hines-Allen, is not merely a roster transaction. It is a declaration of war against every team that thought the Fever could be bullied into submission. If you dismissed this signing as routine, if you scrolled past the headline and assumed it was just another middling acquisition to fill out the bench, you need to completely reassess your understanding of what is happening in Indiana. Because the numbers do not merely support this move. They scream from the rooftops that Caitlyn Clark possesses a basketball intelligence that rivals, and perhaps surpasses, that of the entire Fever front office combined. This is the story of how one player stopped waiting for help, demanded the exact solution she needed, and fundamentally transformed the identity of a franchise. To understand the significance of what Caitlyn Clark engineered, you first have to confront the problem she was forced to solve on her own. The modern WNBA operates with a level of physicality that would shock casual observers. This is not the aesthetic, free-flowing game that league marketing materials would have you believe. Beneath the surface, there is a brutal undercurrent, a code of enforcement that has existed for decades, where elite offensive talent is tested through contact that ranges from aggressive to outright dangerous. When Clark entered the league, she became the immediate focal point of this physical culture. She was grabbed off screens.
Before the break, we got a little John going on. Caitlyn says, hey, you and me, Hayes, you and me. This is how you bring the roof down. All tied up here with 5:14 to go.
What the numbers are. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Myisha Hines-Allen is the most impactful defender when it comes to pure points in the league. And Caitlyn has chosen wisely. Shout out to Caitlyn, man. Let Caitlyn be the GM, man. Why not, man? Amber Cox, clean your desk out. Get out of here.
She was hip-checked on drives. She was targeted with hard fouls designed not to prevent baskets but to send messages. The veteran establishment wanted her to know that fame and college accolades meant nothing once she crossed the threshold into their arena. And here is the part that no one in the Fever organization wants to publicly acknowledge. For 2 years, Clark was navigating that environment with almost no physical protection whatsoever. The Fever roster was built around skill, around shooting, around finesse. What it lacked, catastrophically, was intimidation. There was no player on the Indiana roster whose mere presence on the court made opposing teams reconsider their approach. There was no human deterrent, no physical insurance policy, no player who could set a devastating screen and send the unmistakable message that targeting Caitlyn Clark would come with consequences. The front office knew this. The coaching staff knew this. Everyone who watched film with any analytical rigor knew this. And yet, for reasons that remain frustratingly opaque, the problem persisted season after season while Clark was left to fend for herself, until she decided to stop waiting. During the Fever's media day, Myisha Hines-Allen sat at
Myisha Hines-Allen, no, a few years ago when we were asking for an enforcer, everybody was acting like we were asking somebody to come out on the court and pistol whip somebody. Like, an enforcer is somebody who will handle stuff like this, be a presence, like just show their, it's like
the press conference table and made an admission that, in retrospect, was far more revealing than most people initially recognized. She spoke openly about what drew her to Indiana. She described the opportunity to play with Caitlyn Clark as a massive eye-opening moment. She called Clark one of the greatest players that is ever going to play the game of basketball. Those words alone would have been noteworthy, but what came next fundamentally reframed the entire narrative around this signing. Hines-Allen stated plainly that once she learned Caitlyn Clark explicitly wanted her in Indiana, there were no remaining questions. The decision was made. She signed. Let that settle for a moment. This was not a scenario where the front office identified a need, scouted available talent, negotiated terms, and presented a finished product to their star player. This was Caitlyn Clark actively surveying the landscape, identifying the exact player who could fill the most critical gap on the roster, and personally recruiting her to Indianapolis. The front office facilitated the move, yes. They handled the contractual logistics. But the vision, the identification...
Like choking Caitlyn, then you got to come over there and grab and pull them off of them. A lot of times it's just, oh, we saw that. Okay. Next time down, boom, chicken wing to that girl. And it's like, oh, just a message. She got to send messages and let it be known.
The persuasion that was Clark. She looked at her own roster with unflinching honesty. She saw a team that could score, that could shoot, that could run in transition, but that could not physically protect itself when the game got ugly. She saw a team that opposing coaches' game planned against by simply ratcheting up the aggression, knowing that Indiana would absorb the punishment without retaliation. And she identified Myisha Hines-Allen as the precise solution, not a scorer. Not a shooter, not someone who would demand touches or disrupt offensive flow. An enforcer, a physical presence whose value could not be measured in points per game, but in the psychological recalibration she would force upon every opponent who stepped onto the court against Indiana. This was not a random signing. This was a chess move executed by a player who sees the game at a fundamentally different level than the people whose literal job description is to make these decisions. Skeptics will always demand proof. They will dismiss narrative. They will wave away anecdotal evidence and press conference quotes and the subjective impressions of commentators. And that is perfectly fair. In fact, it is exactly the standard that should be applied, so let us apply it. Since joining the Indiana Fever, Myisha Hines-Allen has posted the highest defensive net points rating in the entire WNBA. The number is staggering.
And then when you get the rebound on defense, the defensive rebound, get the ball to Caitlyn. Do not dribble that ball down the court. That's not you, okay? And I get it. Sometimes you look for Caitlyn.
Plus 9.6. That is not a marginal improvement. That is not a statistical anomaly buried in small sample noise. That is the single most dominant defensive impact metric in a league of professional athletes, and it belongs to the player Caitlyn Clark personally recruited. What does that number actually represent on the court? It means that when Hines-Allen is on the floor, the Fever defense transforms from a unit that opposing offenses could exploit with relative comfort into something approaching a fortress. She is securing defensive rebounds at an elite rate, denying opposing bigs any comfortable position in the paint, and setting screens so physically imposing that they fundamentally alter the geometry.
And she's being face guarded. Just hold the ball and let her juke her man and break free and then get her the ball. Don't just instantly see her face guarded and then just...
geometry of defensive coverages. But the metric only tells part of the story. The film reveals the rest. Watch Hines-Allen operate in the low post, and you see a player who has completely internalized her role. She is not chasing individual statistics. She is not freelancing in the mid-range looking for her own shot. She is positioning herself as an immovable obstacle between the opposing defense and Caitlyn Clark. She is using her frame to create space, to absorb contact, to make it physically uncomfortable for any defender who thinks they can cheat off their assignment to take a run at the Fever's franchise player. She is, in the most precise basketball terminology, functioning as an elite screen and protect asset whose value is measured not in what she produces offensively, but in what she prevents defensively. And the results are undeniable. There is a dimension of basketball that analytics struggle to capture, but that every player who has competed at a high level understands instinctively. It is the psychological dimension. the mental game. The unspoken calculations that happen in fractions of seconds when a player is deciding whether to take a cheap shot, set an extra hard screen, or target a vulnerable opponent. An enforcer changes those calculations fundamentally. The analogy that has been circulating in basketball commentary circles is apt. An enforcer operates like a security guard stationed at the entrance of a high-end store. The security guard does not need to physically confront every potential shoplifter. The guard does not need to chase anyone down the street or engage in physical altercation. The sheer act of standing there, visible, imposing, and clearly prepared to act, changes the behavior of everyone who walks through the door. Myisha Hines-Allen is that security guard for the Indiana Fever. When opposing players see her in the paint, they immediately begin making different decisions. The guard who was planning to hip-check Clark coming off a screen thinks twice. The forward who is going to deliver a hard foul on a driving layup reconsiders the potential consequences. The veteran who had grown accustomed to treating Indiana as a soft target suddenly realizes that the cost-benefit analysis of that approach has shifted dramatically. This is not theoretical. This is observable. Since Hines-Allen joined the roster, the frequency and severity of flagrant contact directed at Caitlyn Clark has measurably decreased. Teams are still physical, because this is the WNBA and physicality is embedded in the culture of the league. But there is a difference between competitive physicality and targeted intimidation, and the latter has been meaningfully curtailed by the presence of a player who is fully prepared to respond in kind. And if a team decides to test those boundaries, if a squad like the Chicago Sky decides to see whether Indiana's new enforcer is more reputation than reality, Hines-Allen has demonstrated a complete willingness to deliver the kind of hard, legal, absolutely unapologetic screen that sends a definitive message reverberating through the entire league. The Fever are no longer soft. They are no longer available for physical exploitation. And every team on the schedule now has to account for that reality in their preparation. The protection Hines-Allen provides extends far beyond Caitlyn Clark, although Clark is obviously the primary beneficiary. Consider Aaliyah Boston. Over the past 2 seasons, Boston has developed into a genuinely phenomenal offensive center. Her footwork in the post has become increasingly refined. Her touch around the basket has improved markedly. Her ability to operate as a secondary playmaker from the high post has added an entirely new dimension to Indiana's offensive scheme. But film study reveals a consistent vulnerability. When opposing teams escalate the physicality in the paint, when veteran bigs start throwing weight around and playing with a meanness that goes beyond standard competitive aggression, Boston has historically struggled to respond in kind. She is not a naturally confrontational player. She competes fiercely, but she does not possess the instinctive nastiness that separates enforcers from everyone else. Hines-Allen's presence on the roster provides Boston with the space and the protection to continue developing that edge at her own pace, without the immediate pressure of having to physically defend herself against players whose primary objective is intimidation rather than basketball. This is the cascading benefit of a truly elite enforcer. The protection radiates outward from the primary target to encompass the entire young core. Every developing player on the Fever roster benefits from operating in an environment where they can focus on growth rather than survival. Maintaining analytical honesty requires addressing the areas where Hines-Allen must improve, not just celebrating the areas where she already excels. There is one specific tendency that, if left uncorrected, has the potential to undermine the very system she was brought in to strengthen. When Hines-Allen secures a defensive rebound, she has demonstrated a recurring impulse to put the ball on the floor and attempt to push it up the court herself. She lowers her head, begins dribbling through traffic, and tries to initiate the transition offense as a ball handler. This must stop immediately. Myisha Hines-Allen is an elite enforcer. She is not a point guard. The moment she secures a defensive board, her singular, non-negotiable priority must be to locate Caitlyn Clark. If Clark is being face-guarded, if the defense is actively denying her the ball, the correct response is not to abandon the plan and improvise. The correct response is to hold the basketball, protect it with her frame, and give Clark the 2 or 3 seconds she needs to manipulate her defender and create a passing window. The Indiana Fever offense operates at historically elite efficiency levels when the basketball is in Caitlyn Clark's hands. Every possession that deviates from that foundational principle is an unnecessary risk, a self-inflicted wound that serves no strategic purpose. Hines-Allen's value is measured in screens set, rebounds secured, fouls deterred, and defensive possessions dominated. It is not measured in transition dribbles or freelance playmaking. The sooner this adjustment is internalized and made automatic, the sooner the Fever's overall efficiency will reach its theoretical ceiling. Step back from the specific details of this signing and examine what it represents at a structural level. Caitlyn Clark, a player in her early 20s, looked at the roster construction of her franchise, identified a critical deficiency that the front office had failed to adequately address across multiple seasons, personally identified the correct solution from the available talent pool, recruited that solution directly, and watched as the resulting impact validated her assessment in the most dramatic statistical terms possible. She did not hold a press conference to complain about the roster. She did not demand a trade. She did not publicly criticize the front office for their inaction. She simply took matters into her own hands with the quiet, ruthless efficiency of someone who understands that results speak louder than grievances. This is the hallmark of a truly transcendent basketball mind. It is not enough to be the most talented player on the court. Championship-level athletes understand that their environment must be engineered to maximize their impact, and when the people responsible for that engineering fall short, the great ones find ways to engineer it themselves. Michael Jordan did this in Chicago. LeBron James did this in Miami and Cleveland and Los Angeles. Tom Brady did this in New England and Tampa Bay. And now Caitlyn Clark is doing it in Indianapolis, operating as both the franchise's greatest on-court asset and its most astute strategic thinker. The Indiana Fever are undergoing a transformation that extends far beyond the addition of a single player. They are shedding an identity, one built on deference, on politeness, on the quiet acceptance of physical punishment, and replacing it with something harder, something more resilient, something that opposing teams will have to genuinely fear. Caitlyn Clark is at the center of this transformation, not merely as a player but as an architect. She recognized the problem when others either could not or would not. She identified the solution with a precision that borders on remarkable. She executed the recruitment with the personal touch that only a player of her stature and charisma could deploy. And now, with Myisha Hines-Allen posting the highest defensive net rating in the entire WNBA, the mathematical evidence supporting her vision is completely, utterly, irrefutably undeniable. The old guard that spent 2 years testing Indiana's resolve, delivering cheap shots and flagrant fouls with impunity, targeting the league's brightest young star because they knew there would be no physical consequence, that old guard is officially on notice. The era of the soft, easily exploited Indiana Fever is dead and buried. In its place stands a team with an elite offensive engine, a developing young core, and now, finally, the physical presence to protect all of it. And the person most responsible for that shift is not wearing a suit in the front office. She is wearing a number 22 jersey and running the show from the point guard position, proving every single game that her understanding of basketball extends far beyond what happens between the lines. The physicality across the league will continue to escalate. The challenges will intensify. The opponents will adapt and counter and search for new ways to disrupt what Indiana is building. But for the first time in her professional career, Caitlyn Clark will face those challenges with a genuine enforcer standing beside her. A player she personally chose, a player whose defensive impact is the most dominant in the entire league, and a player who came to Indiana for one reason above all others, because Caitlyn Clark wanted her there. And that, more than any statistic, more than any press conference quote, more than any highlight reel sequence, tells you everything you need to know about who is really running the Indiana Fever. Question of the day: is Caitlyn Clark operating as the best unofficial GM in the WNBA right now? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how terrified should the old guard be of Myisha Hines-Allen's defense? Drop your answers below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The Fever are just getting started, and we're covering every move.